This is CNY Decides from WAER and Central Current. I'm Bob Beck. Each week on the show, we'll delve into issues and topics we're following this election season. Joining me now is Central Current's Eddie Velasquez, who's written about Governor Kathy Hochul's impact on central New York. Welcome, Eddie. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me again, Bob.
Well, it seems like any discussion about Governor Kathy Hochul needs to begin with Micron. She was here when the deal was closed. Question, though, I have for you, how much credit does she actually deserve compared to the congressional delegation, president, and others?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you start just by kind of thinking about she was in the room when the conversations were happening, at every level, connected with every player in like you said, the congressional delegation, the county executive, the U.S. senators. So, from like a partnership perspective, she was there kind of the entire way through. But I think most importantly also, she signed off on the bill that gave a lot of the financial incentives to Micron at the state level. So there's a little bit of that as well.
Was she the one that kind of had to push that through, do you think?
Well, the legislature, I think, was very agreeable to it. But, at the end of the day, goes to her desk and she puts the signature on it. So
it appears like there has, in fact, been a lot of communication between the city, the county, and the state on how to close the deal, prepare for growth, impacts, that kind of thing. Is that true? And what are people telling you about that?
Yeah, from the perspective of economic development leaders who work very closely with the county and even the mayor of Syracuse herself, Sharon Owens, it's been very collaborative. And I think the strategy across the board has been let's prepare the ground for Micron to grow, and that, touches on all sorts of aspects of life in central New York.
One of the things I want to follow up on quickly on that, too, is there's been this piece that has gone across the interstate, all these other spin-off businesses. Has the governor been heavily involved in that also?
I believe it's been mostly through the Department of Transportation, but I guess if you want to chuck that up to the powers of the governor, yeah, certainly. All of her state agencies kind of touch on Micron and, projects at large at central New York, so.
All right. As you noted in your article, there was a lot of support for training from the state, including the STEAM school. Can you kind of talk about her role and their role in that?
Yeah, I mean, largely, I would say a lot of it has been funding, right? And making sure that there's oversight in how like the planning goes on. So the funding is key. But like the vision for Micron, and this goes down to state agencies like the education department, has like the focus has been let's incubate talent, let's make sure that we're shepherding students toward careers in technical education, technology, careers of the future as they call them. But key to all of that is semiconductor manufacturing. So that's been just big part of the curriculum and the big part of the push.
As we've talked about almost every episode, housing is this big story, not only here, but all across the state of New York and across the country, in fact. But when you look at the housing issue specifically tied to Micron and some of the growth that we're seeing here, do people think the governor's helped with that particular problem?
Yeah, I think there's a couple mindsets on that, and it all I think kind of comes down to how you look at what the solutions for the housing problems in the New York State and Central New York are. I think her initiative to preserve, build, and rehabilitate 800,000 units that she came up with in 2023 was seen as kind of like this big push for more development. We're going to throw public funds at the issue and kind of let developers handle the situation. But I think there have been critics as well of there are other aspects of the housing crisis that are not just development focused. They are, tenant protections, access to legal representation when you're in housing court. And I think some of the more progressive folks in the state legislature and at the county level even have been critical of her lack of sort of policymaking, but also initiative shepherding in that regard as well.
How do people characterize her impact on the region compared to past governors?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the way we started the conversation is it's a little hard to omit the fact that Micron is one of the biggest investments from the private sector in manufacturing in the history of the state. So from the economic development side of things, folks are just being like, hey, this person has been with us the entire every step of the way. She's continuing to kind of do all of this, and yeah, I think it's been like pretty historic from their perspective. And one thing I wanted to point out was Mayor Owens told me that voters should remember that Kathy Hochul's relationship with Syracuse goes far beyond her even being governor. So it goes even further back than that. When she was lieutenant governor, she would do a tour of Syracuse very often, and always seemed to be fond of the place where she went to college. So, yeah.
You noted in your story also in the last election, she didn't exactly poll Democrats with her. Is there any sense she's going to have impact on local races or congressional races this year?
Yeah, I think we can speak about that through kind of the lens of one of the biggest primaries here in central New York, which is the state assembly one, Maurice Brown versus the incumbent Bill Magnarelli. I was speaking with Maurice Brown about this, and he was saying how it was a bit of a mixed bag with the governor. He would sort of applaud her for some of her initiatives, but then he would be kind of disappointed by some of the other ones. I think one of the ones he kind of highlighted as something he liked was the tax on wealthy multi-property owners. But I think that's kind of like what you're going to see is some of the more progressive folks are going to be mixed on the governor's record. And, what remains to be seen is some of those congressional ones where I think Democrats feel like at national level feel like, Long Island, sort of those outside New York City area, areas where some of the areas where Democrats really suffered the most, for the House. So that I think is something to watch as we head into the general election in November.
Eddie Velasquez, of course, a reporter for Central Current. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Bob.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of CNY Decides. Join us next week as Eddie rejoins us to discuss a Syracuse Common Council race. The Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University is a supporter of CNY Decides. The series is a joint effort by Central Current and WAER, and an extended version of this segment is available at WAER.org.